Hi guys, my name's Natalia and welcome back to my channel. So today I have a very fun video for you. I will be tier ranking all of the books I read in 2024. So a little disclaimer before I start. In my last tier ranking video, so I was tier ranking thrillers, and I don't know why I was pronouncing it as tire, so I said tire ranking. Someone actually pointed that out in the comments. It was a nice comment, so it was not like a hate comment or anything. So thank you for correcting me. I will definitely pay attention to how I pronounce it from now on. Now let's take a look at the tiers that I made. So the first tier is new favorites. These books are just absolute gems that really won me over. They're like my top reads of this year. The next tier is close to perfection. So these are books that were really good. They were almost perfect, but there were maybe a few minor things that just prevented these books from becoming my favorites. The next one is solid read. So these are just books that were enjoyable and they were well written, but like for some reason they didn't like blow me away. The next tier is missed the mark. So I would say these books had a lot of potential, but like the execution left me wanting more. And there were just a lot of things I didn't like about these books. And the last tier is hard pass. So these are the books that like I totally did not like and I would never recommend to anyone. So this year I read 23 books and I've got all of them listed here. So let's start ranking them. The first one that I see here is Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've actually read it like very recently. It was in December. And I had so much fun reading it. It was just such a fast-paced, intense read. I really loved the characters. I loved the storyline, and I was just so invested in this story. I couldn't put this book down. So that's why I think it deserves to go to my new favorites. I love this book and this series so much. The next one is, okay, this one was very short. It's called The Elements of Style. It's basically a book that just gives you advice on writing. It talks about like style and punctuation and all of that. I definitely found some of the advice useful. I mean, I did feel that some parts of this book were outdated, and I mean, it is a very short book, so I feel like maybe it does not cover like everything. But generally, I think it does give some practical advice, and I did make some notes while reading it, so I think I will just say it's a solid read. The next book is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and this one, it's a hard pass for me. Like, I had high hopes because I read two other books by Riley Sager and I enjoyed them so much, so I really thought that I might enjoy this one as well, but I feel like just the plot twist was a bit too ridiculous and the story it was just so strange and so unrealistic. I mean, as someone who likes fantasy, like I'm not saying that, you know, every book needs to be realistic, but like usually for thrillers, I just don't like when they feel too unrealistic, you know. Anyway, I thought the story was really strange. The next one is The Reappearance of Rachel Price. I think this one can go to close to perfection. I really enjoyed it. I loved the storyline. It was so intriguing and the plot twists were crazy. I was really invested and the atmosphere was so eerie. So all of that was like perfect. And then there are some things that I also didn't like, specifically the protagonist, and also like there was like this romance subplot that was really, really strange and awkward, and I don't even know why it was added. These two things kind of made it impossible for it to be my favorite read, but I still think it was a very good one, so I'm putting it in close to perfection. Okay, the next book is On Writing by Stephen King, and I think I will put it in new favorites. I really enjoyed reading it. It is like half memoir and half writing advice by Stephen King himself. I feel like a lot of books on writing are just written by authors that are not really that popular. So it's kind of hard to even tell, like, should I trust this person's advice? But I feel like in case of Stephen King, with how successful he is and how good many of his books are, I feel like I can definitely trust his advice. His writing style is really entertaining and really engaging. He adds like a lot of personal anecdotes that are really funny and just help us to get to know him better. And he shares some really good advice on writing. And I also loved that while reading this book, I could feel his passion for writing. Like, it was almost palpable. And I think that in itself was really motivating and inspiring. And I just loved reading this book, and I think it's really inspirational. The next book is it's like an essay. It's called We Should All Be Feminists. I feel like I would just add it into solid read. I feel like it was definitely a very thought-provoking read, and I liked that. I felt like the author put some of my own thoughts into words. So, it was really satisfying to read that. I definitely think it's a piece of literature that maybe everyone should read. Then again, I don't feel like it blew me away or anything like that. So that's why I'm just putting it in solid read. Okay, the next one is The Naturals. So I feel like same as Killer Instinct, I will put it in new favorites just because I love it so much. It is the same series, and both of these books were great, although I feel like I did like Killer Instinct a little bit more, but they were both really great reads. Next, we've got Killjoy by Holly Jackson. It is like a prequel, a novella to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I read it just because I was intrigued, but honestly, I feel like it missed the mark. I couldn't really get into the story, maybe because I read it after I finished the series, so it felt strange to come back to a time before all of these events took place. And then even the ending was a bit underwhelming. It didn't leave such a huge impression on me, so I think it missed the mark a little bit. Next, we've got Atomic Habits. So this is also one of my new favorites. The author shares some really, really amazing advice and a lot of concepts that he talks about I've never heard about before. This book really changed the way I think about habit formation and becoming successful and all of that. It is a really eye-opening and motivational read, so yeah, I really loved it. And then we've got Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. Oh my god, I don't know why do I have so many favorites, but this one is also one of my favorites. Actually, I wouldn't say it's a new favorite because it was my second time reading this book. I loved it just as much as when I first read it. It's such a comforting read. I love these characters so much, and I love Simon and Baz's relationship. I just love this book, and I feel like I could reread it so many times and I would not get bored. Next, we've got The Stolen Heir, and I feel like this one is a solid read. It takes place in the same world that the Folk of the Air trilogy takes place, but we follow different characters. I felt like it was a little bit slow and maybe not that memorable, especially the characters. I don't really remember almost any of them. It was not that memorable, but it also was not bad. The writing was definitely really good. It was really magical and immersive. Because I do love Holly Black's writing. So it was still a solid read, but just was not spectacular. Okay, the next we've got The 7-Year Slip, and I think this one is also one of my new favorites. It is a romance with magical realism elements in it. It has a time traveling trope. It's just such an emotional and complex story. The characters feel so real and relatable. It talks about some heavy topics like grief and, dealing with depression. In the end, it is a very sweet and heartwarming read, and I loved it so much. It's definitely one of my favorites. Next up, we've got the Sundown Motel. Maybe I will put it close to perfection. I don't think it was a perfect read, but I definitely enjoyed it a lot. It is like a mystery thriller about this like really creepy motel and a girl trying to uncover what had happened to her aunt that like mysteriously disappeared many years ago while working in this motel. The atmosphere was really eerie and terrifying. I really liked many of the characters. I think that definitely makes this story so much more interesting because it had many characters that I liked and rooted for. Overall, I think it's a very solid thriller and I really enjoyed reading it. Next, we've got Local Woman Missing, and this one definitely missed the mark. It is another thriller. It's not such a good story. It was very slow for like the first 80%. I just feel like there were so many unnecessary scenes that didn't add that much to the story. I also felt that some of the plot twists at the end were just a bit far-fetched, and I feel like the author just went crazy and she wanted to shock the readers to the point that she started coming up with really crazy implausible scenarios. Also, I think there were a few like unanswered questions. I really don't like when there are like some questions left unanswered, so I think that's also why I didn't enjoy the story that much. Lastly, I felt like the sentence structure was like so simple. Like the writing was not that great. It just started to get a little bit tiresome after a while. So overall, it's not the worst read. Like it's not as bad as The House Across the Lake, but I feel like it just was not really that good. Next, we've got The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and this one is definitely close to perfection. It is like a cozy fantasy read, and I loved it. Honestly, the vibes of this book are so cozy and magical. I love the characters and the found family trope in it. It was just so cute and heartwarming. The reason why it's close to perfection and not perfection is just like maybe it was a little slow paced at times. Like I felt like I wanted the stakes to be a little higher. I mean, I knew that this is a cozy fantasy going into this book, so I cannot really complain about that. I definitely wanted like some more things to happen, and maybe I wish the stakes were a little bit higher, and that would definitely make me feel even more engaged in the story. But overall, it was a very good read. Next, we've got The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and I think this one is also close to perfection. It was a very good thriller, very intense with so many shocking plot twists. Like my mind was blown. I don't think it's really like up there next to my favorite books, but I still think it was a very good, very intense and shocking thriller, and I had so much fun reading it. Next, we've got Sloot. I'm gonna say solid read. It was a very good read, very dark and atmospheric. It is a dark fantasy read with horror elements and witchcraft and folklore. Very intriguing, but also very dark. It had some like really brutal and graphic scenes. There was this one scene that really left me a little bit traumatized, to be honest. Despite that, this book made me feel so many different emotions. It was pretty intense. I loved the main character, Abita. She was so strong and resilient, and she was just such an empowering character to read about. And I also really liked her relationship with Sloot, which is like this mystical creature that woke from slumber in the forest, and they will end up like working together and helping each other. I thought that was really precious. I also felt like maybe the pacing was a bit uneven and the middle part dragged a little bit, but definitely the final part of the book was really, really intense, and I was so invested in this story. And the ending was also really satisfying. So overall, I think it was a solid read. Maybe not for everyone, but it definitely had like many strong aspects. Next, we've got Ruthless Vows, which is the second book in the Letters of Enchantment duology. So it is the book that comes after Divine Rivals. I think I will say new favorites. I really enjoyed reading it. It was so emotional, and I think this is the only book that made me cry this year. This series has so many characters that I hold dear to my heart, and I love reading about them. I think it's part of the reason why it's one of my favorite reads this year. But I also love the romance. There's definitely not as much romance as there was in Divine Rivals. Because like Iris and Rowan were like separated for a huge part of the book. But I feel like that's what made it even more special. That's what made every encounter between them so special. And then also Rebecca Ross's writing is just so beautiful. I love her writing. So, overall, it's one of my favorite reads of this year. Next, we've got Belladonna, and oh my god, I will say it missed the mark. I know a lot of people liked this book, but I don't know, it definitely had a lot of potential. I loved the gothic atmosphere. I loved the idea for the book. So it basically talks about a girl who can see ghosts, and she can also see death himself, and for some reason she cannot die. So like the plot is really interesting. She will also be solving some mysteries, so I loved all of that. What I didn't like is definitely the character of Death. I felt like he was as bland as a piece of stale bread. Like usually when you think of a character of Death, you think of someone like really scary and terrifying without any mercy, but he was not like that at all. He just felt too like soft and sentimental, and just like he was just so boring and uninteresting. And also his romance with the protagonist made me so uncomfortable. I don't know, he was saying very strange things to her, like I've been waiting for you my whole life. They also fell in love like way too quickly. It was like almost insta love, which I hated. I love a good slow burn. I feel like they went from hating each other to loving each other way too quickly. So it didn't do that for me. I felt like they didn't have any chemistry. So also didn't really like any of the characters. Maybe I liked Blythe a little bit, but she's like a secondary character. So overall, I decided not to continue this series. I don't think it's something that I would enjoy. I just didn't really like it. Next, we've got Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? And I think it was a solid read. I mean, now that I think about it, I don't think I remember that much advice from it. Like when it comes to like on writing or Atomic Habits, I remember quite a lot of the advice that was given, but for this book I feel like I don't remember it that much. Maybe I would have to like reread it. I definitely wished the author would expand on some of the topics. I feel like she just really barely scratched the surface, but I understand it would just make the book way too long. So I understand why it was written like that. Also, some of the advice felt like things that like everyone knows, like kind of like cliches. But that was only some of the advice. Some of it was definitely useful, and there were also some exercises in this book that I think are really useful. So overall, it was a nice read, but not really groundbreaking. There are definitely better reads on like psychology than this one. But still, I don't think it was like bad. Next, we've got Wrong Place, Wrong Time, and it definitely missed the mark. I think the idea for the book was really good. It like portrays the concept of time loops. This mom witnesses her son murder someone. So she'll be trying to, understand like why her son killed someone, and maybe she'll be trying to prevent it. So I loved the idea, but the execution was not that great. It was really, really slow. Didn't like the characters that much. I mean, I definitely like the portrayal of motherhood. While I'm not a mother myself, I feel like felt really realistic, and I feel like a lot of people that have children might relate to what the protagonist is talking about. And then I felt like the ending it was shocking, but I felt like some of it lacked logical consistency. Overall, it didn't impress me that much. Next, we've got Spectacular by Stephanie Garber, which is a novella. It is like an addition to the Caraval trilogy, and I definitely enjoyed reading it. It is like a Christmas themed read, and I read it right before Christmas, so it got me so excited for Christmas. I definitely wish there was more of Juliet and Scarlett in this book. They were just like background characters, and it's really sad because they are my favorites personally, but it was like a story focused on Donatella and a little bit of legend as well. I loved like how magical and festive it felt, although maybe there were a few aspects that I felt were a little bit disturbing. So that's why I cannot say it is my favorite, but I will say it is close to perfection. Also has some really beautiful illustrations, so it is a great read to just revisit the world and the characters that you like while soaking up some Christmas vibes. Okay, the last book is A Study in Drowning, and this one definitely one of my favorites. I just loved the eerie and haunting atmosphere. It had some very interesting mystery in it. It is like a mix of fantasy, dark academia, and mystery, so I love all of these things. I love the characters, like they had their flaws, but they were really likable, and I loved the romance subplot as well. And I was just really enchanted by all the careful descriptions and the mystical setting that was created in this book. So the cover is so pretty. It's literally my favorite book cover of all time, to be honest. So that was the last book. I think I'm quite satisfied with this ranking. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or maybe if any of them are on your TBR. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!